Welcome to the LIFELETICS podcast, a brand dedicated to the growth of athletes as they transition to life after sports. My name is Megan Ruder, former D1 swimmer at Florida Atlantic University. My goal here is to make all athletes feel empowered to take on the sport of life.
As athletes, we tend to fall into the all or nothing mindset. And when we're in, we're in. And when we're out, we're usually very far out. Learning to live in the gray and embrace this middle ground is really the way to create sustainability when it comes to food, exercise, and even body changes in life after sport.
Before we get started, I encourage you to subscribe here and follow us on Instagram at Team LIFELETICS for more information on how you can be involved in the LIFELETICS community. Let's dive in. All right, guys, welcome to the LIFELETICS podcast. We are on episode 33. So exciting. And today I could not be more excited because we have Katie Spada. And if you don't follow her, you're a little bit behind the times already. So you need to follow her. She's a former athlete, nutritionist, and she specializes in really helping athletes focus on fueling their body and life after sport. And it's truly her passion. You can see it in her content. And Katie, welcome. And we're so pumped to have you on here.
Oh, thank you so much, Megan. I am so excited to be on the LIFELETICS podcast and just can't wait to share with everyone listening a little bit more about fueling for life after sport.
Yeah. And like this topic is something that we don't talk about a lot. I remember when I was swimming, I maybe had a nutritionist come in once out of my 4 years. And like that went in 1 year, out the other. Like we were still eating the cafeteria food. Nothing was really actually changing within our diet. I think that we could have been served a little bit better if we knew a little bit more about how to fuel ourselves and to not overthink things because there's so much information out there.
Yes.
So give us a rundown. What is it exactly that you do? I know you're pulled in so many different directions, but give us the rundown.
Yeah. So my business, Spada Strong Nutrition LLC, is my nutrition coaching business, and it really is focused on helping former athletes learn how to fuel their bodies post-sport in a healthful, enjoyable, and stress-free way, because I do think food can be so stressful when we retire. And then I also work through body image struggles because those go hand in hand with how we make food choices. My full-time job is actually as a pediatric dietitian. So I do a lot of critical care nutrition, which allows me to have this deeper understanding of human physiology, which I see play out in my nutrition coaching all the time. But I really got into focusing on the former athlete space after I retired from being a synchronized swimmer for most of my life, college, national teams. I went through all the stages and found myself feeling like I was constantly in this cycle of needing to diet, but then feeling like I fell off the diet. And then the scale just kept going up and I was feeling really frustrated in my body. And I was like, there has to be a better way. And that's kind of where my research started.
Amazing. So you started all of this because you went through it firsthand. And
Yes.
it was something that after you, and in a sport, like I know I was in swimming, you're in synchronized swimming, which is so badass, by the way. And like very not common out there. So it's like super cool. There's so much focus on your body. We're in these, like we're in bathing suits all day long. And like I could walk in Walmart in a bathing suit and just feel so normal. Whereas like, other like football and, some other sports, it might not be as highlighted. How are people dealing with those body image struggles post sport when I know it's very highlighted during sport?
Yes. I mean, I see a couple of different things, and it really does depend on the sport culture that the athlete is coming from, whether your body was focused on in the appearance way, like an aesthetic sport, synchro, ice skating, dancing, cheerleading, gymnastics, something like that, or your body was focused on still an appearance, but your appearance associated with your performance, like you need to get bigger in order to be stronger, or you need to lose weight in order to run faster. All of those things really kind of mesh themselves into our self-worth, because our performance as athletes is tied to our self-worth. And if our body is going to impact our performance, then our body impacts our self-worth. And I could go down a whole rabbit hole here, so I'll tie this up. But when an athlete retires, something that I don't think we're prepared for is how normal it is to experience a recalibration period where your body does fluctuate. And so frequently athletes panic because there's that fear of letting themselves go. That weight gain means we're failing. And so they jump into dieting or jump into some form of extreme exercise or nutrition regimen, which just makes the problem worse.
Yeah. So when we jump into, say, an extreme of something, does that spike cortisol? Where does that worsening of the problem happen? Is it within the
Yeah.
cortisol or is it within the mentality? How does that go?
So all of the above. And it depends on so many factors, but just kind of a brief overview here. If your body is under significant amount of stress, which our bodies were as athletes, we're prone to having higher levels of cortisol anyways. And so your body is trying to figure out how to navigate life without living in that constant like fight or flight state like we do with athletes. Now, the other thing is if we are significantly under consuming for our nutrition needs, whether that was as an athlete or in retirement, um, that can have a negative impact on our metabolic function. And so it's called a metabolic injury. And if you end up with a metabolic injury, now you're going to be constantly chasing your tail because you're going to feel like you have to keep eating less and less in order to lose weight. And it's just not sustainable. So there's lots of different factors that can go into that depending on what extreme the athlete is engaging in and what the history is. But overall, extremes in general, they're not supposed to be sustainable and they're usually very damaging.
Yeah. Like you just said, they're not supposed to be sustainable. And so, how can we work towards something that's more sustainable? Because nutrition itself is so overwhelming. Already, this transition is so overwhelming. And then we're dealing with body image, like our body's changing, and that's normal, but we don't know it at the time. So, what does sustainable look like in this transition?
Mm. Such a good question. So I really say sustainable. So I have my clients ask themselves this question. Could you and would you, both are important. Could you and would you want to eat this way or exercise this way, whatever it is, for the rest of your life? And if the answer to either of those is no, it's probably not something that should be sustained. Now, the additional piece of that is as athletes, we tend to fall into the all or nothing mindset. So we're either all in or we're all out. And when we're in, we're in. And when we're out, we're usually very far out. And learning to live in the gray and embrace this middle ground is really the way to create sustainability when it comes to food, exercise, and even body changes in life after sport.
Yeah, it's so true. All in mentality is something that in sports it serves us really well, right?
Yes, it does.
But then outside of sport, you're like, wait, that mentality is not sustainable. So jumping into the nutrition aspect of it, like you said, we can either be all in or all out oftentimes. And what does that gray look like? Because there's like this 80-20 rule or all of these, that could be another myth, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
like the 80-20 rule, um, what should it be? I know there's some people who lean more towards like 95-5, and that's just what works for them. Is it what works for you? And how do you find that?
So it is what works for you. And it's also asking yourself, why are you making this food choice? Because the all or nothing mentality often is driven by our why. So we're either picking the salad because we're trying to lose weight, cut down on calories, cut down on carbs, whatever it is, right? Or the flip side of that could be, well, I'm choosing a salad because I like the refreshing crispness of the lettuce and I want to add more fiber to my meal and I want to increase my micronutrient intake. The action is the same, but the why is very different. And so when you're thinking about like, well, how do I create that sustainability? Is it 80? Is it 20? I really say, well, let's just kind of scratch all of those percentages and ask, why are you making this food choice?
Mhm.
Because when we're able to make a food choice with clarity and coming from a place of self-respect and nourishment. And I could expand on what I mean by like nourishment and actually being fueled. That kind of washes away the need for any percents, because then what you're doing is saying yes to a spontaneous, ice cream date with your significant other and still choosing to have whole grains, veggies, lean proteins, and they can coexist together.
Mhm. Now, I know too, they can coexist together. There does have to be, like you said, that nourishment part where
Mhm.
you do feel confident in saying yes to your ice cream date because you know that your body can handle it. Whereas you're
Yes.
not saying yes to that ice cream date every single night. Um,
Right.
so what does that nourishment part look like? And when should you feel confident? I feel like you should feel confident at all times to say yes to an ice cream date. However,
Nice.
but when does that nourishment part kind of come into play?
Yeah. So there's multiple factors to nourishment. So are we nourishing our bodies from a physical standpoint, or are we looking for social, emotional, and connective nourishment? Because that's one of the things when I say, like I talk about fueled a lot, fueling your body and fueling your life, it's multifaceted. So when you're thinking about the ice cream date, right, you can ask yourself, well, is this like maybe you don't necessarily need the physical fuel because you ate all your meals today, you're physically nourished, but this would serve to enhance the emotional connection that you have with your significant other. So you say yes to the ice cream date and really lean into honoring, your fullness. Maybe you get a smaller size, whatever it might be. So it's kind of balancing out, well, again, kind of that why. Why am I making this food choice? Is this physical nourishment? Do I need carbs, fats, proteins, energy to keep my blood sugar sustained to support my body? Or am I engaging in this because it's socialization and I'm trying to nourish my soul, if you will? It's kind of nourishing the body and nourishing the soul. And that's when deciding, to your point, you're not going out on ice cream dates every night. Right. And if you did, you probably wouldn't feel very good. So it's also leaning into what makes your body feel good as well.
Yeah. And that takes a lot of self-awareness. Takes a lot of sitting down and just really, really leaning into that and trusting yourself. And I've said this
Mhm.
many times where I feel like as former athletes, this is a side effect of being an athlete is that we have a hard time trusting ourselves because everybody was making decisions for us for
Yes.
15 years. I always had
Yes.
somebody to go to for external validation, and I could be confirmed that I was making the right decision. But now I have to sit here and trust myself that I am full, I am nourished, and I can say yes to this.
Yes.
So you lean a lot into on your social media about hunger cues and being full and understanding what that means. And I've seen
Yeah.
you one time post like you will leave like one bite of your bowl. And I think that like I could not do that.
Yeah.
Not at all. Like only if maybe half my Chipotle bowl is done will I put it in there. But if it's over, like I'm just gonna finish it. So I'll work on that. But what does that look like and why is that important?
God, that is so important for many reasons when it's coming back to just like you talked about, being able to trust yourself and trust your body. And so sometimes for me, the act of leaving just one bite or like one piece on my plate, it might seem so ridiculous. Like, why don't you just eat it? Just finish it. But it's really exercising that self confidence and also self respect, because I could go ahead and finish it, but I would also potentially be disrespecting the level of fullness that I'm feeling. And I want to really respect that. Now, the way that I got there and the way that I teach my clients to get there is unfortunately kind of a guess and check. It's figuring out portion sizes that, maybe you're used to eating 3 slices of pizza, but you consistently feel gross after having 3 slices of pizza. So use that as a learning opportunity to gather data. The next time you sit down for a pizza, what if you stopped at 2 and just assessed how are you feeling? And oh, I could give you a whole dissertation on this. So again, I'll keep it to the highlights, but there are tools that we can use, different feelings that you'll notice. I talk about the diminishing returns of food as well. So if there's any economic or finance people who are listening to this, that will be a familiar term, but food has diminishing returns. If you think about when you take that first bite of food, especially if it's like a restaurant you're really excited about going to or your favorite meal, it is this overwhelming feeling of happiness, euphoria, deliciousness. And the further you go through the meal, that feeling starts to decrease. You will hit a point of maximum
Dopamine.
benefits.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Dopamine. Yes.
Exactly. Whereas you're getting the physical needs and the emotional needs, because food is emotional, but then that starts to fade. So I'll sometimes ask clients, is the flavor still as strong as it was, or has it faded? Are you able to focus a little more clearly? Are you really thinking about food? How does your stomach physically feel? And we take all of these into account. And just like our sport, the more you practice it, the more it becomes second nature. Like I'm sure being a swimmer, like you could do freestyle like all day long because it's just easy to you now. But that only happened after years of practice. To become an expert in your hunger and fullness cues, it takes practice, learning, tweaking. And then before you know it, you don't really have to think about it anymore. You just do it.
Mm. And a lot of leaning into that self-trust for sure.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned are the flavors still good? Like these are things I would never think about. And, maybe we are leaning into it's just, I just need to finish it at this point. Like, oh, I'm
Yes.
full. I really don't want to, but like I cannot leave those last 4 bites. Like
Yes.
guilty. I've been there.
Yeah.
But I should be able to say, like, you know what? This will be a great snack later.
Right. And I think you mentioned the guilt piece, and I hear a lot of people say, like, well, it's so wasteful, right? Like,
Mm.
it's such a waste if I leave it on my plate. And this is where I really like to kind of challenge that narrative and see if we can reframe it, all while recognizing, yes, there is a significant amount of, you know, hunger and food insecurity throughout the world. And so I'm not saying let's be wasteful with food, but if you've served yourself a portion and you get three quarters of the way, or you're down to the last 3 bites, but you're full, it is just as much, if not more of a waste to put food into your body when your body is not going to benefit from it in either a physical or emotional way as it is to leave it on the plate. And I'd much rather leave the food on the plate than disrespect my body in that way by eating past my comfortable level of fullness. Now, big asterisk there, because there are many times that I still eat past fullness because I'm a human. It's a human thing to do. I give myself a lot of grace. The Super Bowl, I ate way past fullness, and that's okay.
Totally fine.
You're really challenging, like, well, what is a waste? And is the food on my plate, I say this tongue in cheek, but not tongue in cheek, like really going to make it to the people who are food insecure? Instead, what if we donated money to, food banks or food pantries, and we're able to support in that way instead of feeling guilty for leaving 2 bites when we're full?
Mm. It's huge. And the waste part is definitely a good point and something that I think about often. Even when it comes to food that is in the fridge that we probably won't eat and it's not gone bad yet, but my boyfriend leads a little bit more towards like, just toss it, get rid of it, like whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, no, like there's homeless people right down the street. Like we can go give it to them. But like you said, what are the odds of me putting that in my car and actually doing that?
Right.
However, once you lean into, okay, it's going to be more wasteful for my body than just leaving it in the fridge. And like I said, having it as a snack later, like
Yes.
you can still eat it when your body does need it.
Mhm.
So go ahead, lean
Yeah.
in on that.
No, I was just going to say, I'm a really big advocate, especially in this process of, you know, starting out small. So serve yourself while knowing you have full permission to go back for more. Now, restaurants are a different story because we're not choosing, but if you're eating at home, feel free to give yourself permission to go back for second, thirds, and fourths if you're still hungry while having a smaller portion to start, because that also gives you a pause to assess, how am I feeling? Am I still enjoying the food? Am I physically full? Am I, still hungry? Do I want more? Do I need more? Um, and so, when you have that opportunity, give yourself the space to lean in and see what is a good portion that feels good for me.
I want to play a little game.
Let's
So
do it.
this is called Debunk the Myth. And there are so many myths around nutrition. And I know you know this. And I'm sure our
Yes.
audience knows this, at least to an extent. I don't know if they are familiar with how much is out there,
Mm.
because the more I've leaned into nutrition and truly trying to be more intentional with what I eat, I'm learning there's so much out there that doesn't make any sense, like logical sense. So, all right, first one, don't eat after 8 p.m.
Myth.
And why?
Your So your metabolism does not shut off. It never shuts off. What might happen is you go into rest and digest mode, towards the end of the night. And so you may feel like you wake up more full the next day because digestion has slowed down. But what has not changed is the amount of absorption that your body has for those foods that you ate. And so whether you're eating at 8 p.m., 11 p.m., 8 a.m., the time of day doesn't matter. It really comes down to the composition of your meals and the quantity of your meals throughout the day, regardless of what time it is on the clock.
hmm Now, one thing I want to talk about with this specific one is there any potential that it can affect your sleep? Because I've worn my Aura ring, which I love my Aura ring, for a little while now. And I will notice that nights that I eat, say like I was in New York City, of course I have to get pizza, late night pizza. So
Naturally.
naturally, and so I'm eating pizza, and maybe I get to sleep 45 minutes later, like in laying in bed 45 minutes later, and you can see that my heart rate is declining later on in the night. So
hmm
what is that time frame? I know you're not a sleep expert, but like, what is that time frame as far as eating a big meal before bed?
So it's going to depend. It's going to be very individualized, as with everything in nutrition. If you notice that it's impacting the quality of your sleep, then yeah, maybe you do eat a little bit earlier. Or if you have something like acid reflux, then we do recommend eating earlier because that can cause an exacerbation of symptoms. If you're having a meal that's really heavy in protein, fiber, fat, that is going to take longer and take more energy to digest overnight. So you may want to give yourself a couple more hours before you go to bed. If you're having a quick snack, maybe it's like a couple Oreos, handful of cereal, whatever it is, those are going to be quick carbs. You're going to digest them pretty quickly and probably won't see a huge impact on your sleep.
Yeah.
Um, so if you notice a difference and it impacts the amount that you're resting and waking up, maybe you do push it back a couple hours. Our normal digestion curve, and it really depends on, again, what you're eating, but it's usually between 4 to 6 hours for full, complete digestion. So if you eat, say, at 8 and you go to bed at 10, you've done a big bulk of the digesting already.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've noticed that as well. It's really only within that hour range where at least me personally have noticed it. And I love that you mentioned, just as a quick note, that this is so individualized. Everything is so individualized, especially around nutrition.
Mhm.
And, our bodies don't respond the same. And so comparing ourselves and what we're eating and what our plate looks like versus somebody else's doesn't serve us.
Right.
So
Exactly.
that'll lead me into um, drink a gallon of water a day.
Myth. So this is such a big one for me because I see so many on social media and things like that. I think even like in 75 hard, the recommendation is drink a gallon of water a day. And some people, depending on body size, their height, the amount of physical activity they're having, do need a gallon of water a day. Like, for example, my fiance, when we calculate out his fluid needs, he needs a gallon of water a day, but he's like 6 foot. He's a large human. Me, a gallon of water is almost double what I actually need. And there can be, it's extreme, but there can be extreme cases where you drink too much water, you drop your sodium levels, you create hyponatremia, and there can be a lot of medical complications to that. So this is where, while I think most people can drink more water, a gallon as a blanket recommendation is arguably too much for a majority of the population.
So powerful because it's so, like you said, it's a blanket policy.
Mhm.
Gallon of water a day keeps the doctor away. Apple a day keeps the doctor away. Like these things that were even taught as kids, not even in athletics. That just,
Yes.
clear your plate. You don't get up from the table until you clear your plate. And it's like
Yes.
there's so many things that like just in society we are exposed to and just kind of
Mhm.
get mentally brainwashed, I guess you could say.
Yes.
So here's another one. And I loved this one around the holidays because whew, I go to a big box gym and I saw all their advertisements and it totally made me think of you. That said, that said, um, I'll work it off in the gym or burn to earn.
The burn to earn mentality, I think it is so strong, especially in the athletic community, but in the fitness culture in general. This notion, first of all, myth, if that wasn't obvious when
Yeah.
I first started into it. Um, this notion that in order to be able to eat food or, not have to feel guilty about food, we have to work it off or burn it off or earn the calories for it is just such a contraindication to how our bodies work because our bodies need calories and they need food and energy regardless. Um, and it also comes down to a relationship with food standpoint too, because when we start to implement compensation, well, if I eat ice cream, then, I'll work out. Or if I run today, then I can have pizza. We create this morality connected with food and this hierarchy with food essentially. And that's when it starts to compound with guilt and shame and anxiety. Because what happens if your significant other says, like, let's order pizza tonight, but you haven't worked out today? Does that mean you don't eat? Does that mean you have to order something different? It doesn't allow for living life in between. And so I always like to say and encourage athletes and non athletes figure out a why for working out that is not connected to food. If this wouldn't burn a single calorie or change the way your body looks, would you want to do it? If so, why? And really deconstructing and breaking down that burn to earn mentality just creates so much more peace with food and exercise.
Yeah. They're two separate entities. They
They
are not
are.
related. And it's really tough for us to decompartmentalize that in our head because I think as athletes, where it was fuel and it still is fuel for our body to perform and to do all these things, that's
Mhm.
still the mentality, even though we're in a different season of our life where we may not be working out as much. And our
Exactly.
workouts are mean completely different things than they did back then. I'm not performing. I don't have a coach to perform for. I don't have a race to run or
Right.
anything. So it's like I'm working out for a different reason. Your food should
Yep.
be for a different reason as well.
Exactly.
So
There's
how do we, yeah, lean in on that and how do we kind of really trust ourselves with that?
Yeah, right. I think one of the biggest pieces that really helped me with this because I was a diehard burn to earn. I will count the calories on the treadmill until I make sure I burn off, whatever I had for dinner. I was in deep. Um and I think one of the biggest things that really helped me was to realize when you look at total energy expenditure throughout the day from a human physiology standpoint, our dedicated exercise is a very small part of that. We have our body's resting energy expenditure, which includes the ability to breathe, the ability for digestion, the ability for your muscles to stay preserved, for your body to circulate, all of these things that require energy that have nothing to do with whether you got out of bed or not. you need to eat. And so it really just showed me that regardless of whether I'm in the gym or just living my life on a day to day basis, I need food and I don't have to earn my food. I earned the right to eat food the moment my eyes opened and I was given the gift of another day. And that is really, I think, something that a lot of athletes struggle with because we do have that narrative of food is fuel. And it is, and I like to add the food is fuel and it's also other things, or food is fuel for, and then fill in the blank for exercise, for socialization, for connection, for love, for work, for, mental energy. It's very expansive.
It is. And I love that you mentioned really leaning into why you're eating what you're eating.
Yeah.
I had a moment where so things are heightened when you're pregnant. I was craving salty foods. I still am. Like anything salty, that's what I want. And I learned now it's most likely because I need more magnesium in my diet. But that's just um anyway, so I could not get the thought of Chick-fil-A fries out of my head. And I haven't had Chick-fil-A in probably a year. But
Hmm.
for some reason, I remembered the taste vividly. I was like, this is what I need. And I probably put it off for 2 weeks that I thought about it and just thought about it and was like, no, you don't need it. No, you don't need it. Like I was
Hmm.
going to guilt myself for getting it. And
Yeah.
the moment that I literally went through the drive through and just told the lady I needed a medium fry, I was like, I did it. Who cares? And I'm like, this is what I want right now. And I'm going to eat it because I can. And and I knew like I literally have like you in the back of my head sometimes. I'm like, Katie would be proud
Yes,
that like
sorrow.
I did that, no guilt free, got some fries because I felt like it. And obviously I know that that's not an everyday thing. Like it's not gonna make or break me.
Yeah.
Whereas we put this pressure on ourselves to feel like everything is gonna be make or break.
Yes, we do.
Why
And
do we do that?
I I feel like there's so many narratives within the nutrition world that create these extreme thoughts like, oh, if I have fries, then I'm going to gain weight, have diabetes, hypertension, whatever it is. There's a lot of these extremes that are drawn from it. And there's also a lot of food stigmatization as well. Like, oh, well, if I get fast food, then I'm being unhealthy. Or if I eat this, then I'm being unhealthy. And health is multifactorial. And so a lot of the reasons why we feel that way or we put that pressure on ourselves is because of societal expectations or norms. If
Yeah.
someone is eating McDonald's, for example, there's a lot of stigma around that. People have a lot of feels about it when we don't know if that's the first time they're eating McDonald's in a year, 6 months, whatever it is. And so I think a lot of it is just needing to evaluate like, why do we feel that way about certain foods? Food is just food. And yes, there are foods that are more nutrient dense and foods that are less nutrient dense. There are also foods that fuel us from, pregnancy cravings. There is nothing wrong with having a fry, because a medium fry, because that sounds good. And so, yeah, just really meshing the nutrition physiology with nutrition psychology, I think is one of the best ways to create that peace. And I am so proud and I'm so glad I was in your
Yeah.
head.
I was thinking about one other story that would kind of mesh with this. And it was when I first got pregnant. And when you start to see all of these restrictions, it can feel very restrictive. Like, don't eat deli meats, don't eat sushi, don't eat all these things that could potentially hurt the baby. It's totally
Yeah.
understand it and totally warranted. Um, there was one thing on that list that I could not do, and it was cheese. And so apparently some cheeses have potential for having listeria in them. So I read into this so much more because I had a full on mental breakdown. I was like, I ordered breakfast and I accidentally got cheese on it. Like I forgot to tell them no cheese at first watch. And I was like, I'm terrible. I can't believe I did that. Am I going to eat it? I have to eat it. but like, I feel so guilty, blah, blah, blah. I broke down. I was like bawling my eyes out. I'm like, I can't do all of these restrictions. And
Yeah.
especially cheese. Like, cheese is something that's so ingrained in our life. And
Yes.
it's delicious. So, and it's not terrible for you. So that was the other thing. So I leaned more into it, and it was more like, if it's pasteurized, you're good to go. And if
Yeah.
it's unpasteurized, you should stay away from it. But I was like leaning more towards where there's so many restrictions. So when we go on a diet that's
Hmm.
similar to what it looks like, um,
Hmm.
what are the reasons some people go on diets? And are the reasons why good intentioned, but sometimes maybe they have the bad outcomes?
Yeah. I think almost all the time, and maybe I'll even say all the time, when someone is choosing to go on a diet, it usually is because they want better for themselves in some way. They want to feel better in their body, they want to have better health, they want to improve in some way. So most of the time diets are started out of good pure intentions. But the reason why diets are so appealing is because they do provide structure. They have these grandiose claims: follow us for 30 days, you'll be a brand new person. Do this, you'll shed 10 pounds. And so the marketing around them is very attractive too. The problem is that diets don't work. They work for what they're created for, which is to give you this false sense of hope, like it's working, and then drop you. You feel like a failure. Now you need to go on another diet. This is one of the reasons why the diet industry is a $1 billion industry,
Yeah, that's insane.
right?
Mm.
And so, so many people really start diets with the purest of intentions. Their doctor said you need to lose weight to lower your blood pressure or whatever it is. And they're like, okay, I'm going on a diet. Whereas diets are not the sustainable answer. We really just need to make nutrition modifications and restriction. So, back to your point about restriction, if you go into a diet and the diet says you can't eat this, you can't eat this, you can't eat this, immediately your brain is like, well, that's all I want.
Mhm.
If I say, like, you could never eat pizza again, you are going to want to have pizza today, tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, like all the days.
Girl, that cheese was on my mind every day.
I didn't exactly. And I'm sure, the fries were on your mind. And
Yes.
that is how, it's like I say, like, don't think about a pink elephant. And then, of course, you get a picture of a pink elephant in your
Yeah.
head. And so when we think we can't have something, that immediately creates more of a draw to it. Um, so that's why I really like to practice nutrition addition over nutrition restriction. Well, what can we add in? Okay, you're struggling with high blood pressure. Can we add in more potassium foods because that helps to lower blood pressure? Okay, you're having high blood sugars. Can we balance out your carbs with more proteins, fats, and fibers? You know, see what we can add in to optimize your nutrition rather than say, you can't eat this, you can't eat this, because that just leads to binging, overeating, and craving it more.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I love this addition mindset of, okay, what can we add? Recently, my dad, he's been, having gastrointestinal issues, and he's needed to add more fiber into his diet. And so it's been
Yeah.
really amazing and really just awesome to see him thinking about, okay, being intentional, like, how much fiber is in this? Okay, I got my oats this morning. Like, sometimes that might look like you are substituting things. It doesn't
Yes,
mean you're restricting that thing. It just means you're going to end up substituting it, and your mentality towards it just seems a lot better.
absolutely. It really is coming back to, why are you making that food choice? If you feel like you have to choose the oatmeal over the pancakes because pancakes are off limits, they're restricted, you're going to probably not enjoy the oatmeal and just be thinking about the pancakes. But if you're like, oh, I'm going to choose the oatmeal because that's going to add more fiber to my day and that's going to be beneficial for my GI tract, that is a whole different mindset. And maybe you'll still have pancakes occasionally, but you're going to feel a lot better about the oatmeal choice and not be lamenting the fact that you can't have pancakes.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of things too that are like, go into a protein first mentality, where like you eat your protein first? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm going to give you the science and the psychology.
Okay.
The the science on it is that, especially if someone does have diabetes, gestational diabetes, something like that, eating protein first can actually reduce blood sugar spikes and lower kind of like the impact, increase the insulin sensitivity. So that way you're able to more efficiently pull sugar out of the blood into the cells and use it for energy. So having protein first can be a potential tool depending on why you need that tool in the first place. Now, the psychology of it is it's kind of like when someone is eating all of their vegetables first in order to fill themselves up or, try and eat less. Let me just eat my vegetables first or whatever it might be. We're not as satisfied. And what the science there shows is that we tend to eat more than if we ate a variety of the foods on our plate or had the food that we were looking forward to most first. So that is where we really have to mesh the nutrition physiology with nutrition psychology, because if you eat the protein first, but you were really looking forward to the butter garlic pasta or whatever it is, chances are you're going to probably eat more than you would have if you just eat the protein first than if you enjoyed the meal altogether.
Mm, that's huge. I don't think I ever would have thought of that. So thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome.
This has been seriously so amazing. And I know we talked a lot about the emotional aspect of food, which is so important and so not talked about enough. I've seen a lot more dietitians, nutritionists that are all getting more into the space. So it's really amazing to see because it is a fine line. It's very much a fine line because we want to be healthy, but there's so
Yes.
much in our society that unfortunately is somewhat unhealthy. We have fried foods, we have fast food, we have all these things are ingrained in our society, and
Mm,
that's not going away.
mm,
So, learning how to be intentional with what we're eating and do this confidently is so important. So, a
yeah.
few things. I want to acknowledge you for the work that you're doing and just for putting this goodness out into the world and really have been taking it so seriously. You put your passion into it, and it's just amazing to see. So, thank you. And also, I always like to end on this question. So, imagine I'm a former athlete. I'm actually in the midst of my transition, or maybe I'm a senior that's about to go through the transition. What are your
Mhm.
3 action items that you would give to that person, that athlete who's about to go through this?
Ooh, such a good question. So, first would be try something new, try something brand new, whether it's a hobby, a new sport, a new physical activity, going out to eat by yourself. Just try something new because you've been so regimented for so long. Give yourself the space to explore. The next would be to cry because I don't think we give ourselves, I know that sounds weird,
I love it.
but I don't think we give ourselves the proper space to mourn. It really is a grieving process when you retire. And I think one of the reasons why so many of us, do wrestle with it is because we don't properly allow ourselves to grieve leaving our sport and moving into life after sport. So give yourself that space to cry. It, it is okay. And then third would be find support, whether that is a friend who's retiring with you, you find someone on social media, or you talk to a family member, a therapist, a counselor, whatever it is. Find support because walking through it alone, you can really get in your head and kind of feel like you're going a little batty when what you're walking through is probably very normal. So those would be the three things that I would recommend for someone transitioning out.
Amazing. It's amazing, amazing, amazing. Seriously, thank you so much for your value. Thank you for coming into this full minded, just ready to go and bringing all your passion. I appreciate it. If anybody wants to find you, how can people work with you? Where can they best find you?
Yeah. So I'm most active on Instagram at fueling.former.athletes. And then right now, the main way to work with me is through the Fueled Former Athlete Academy. which is my nutrition coaching program for former athletes to help them transition nutrition in life after sport.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thanks, Megan.
Well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the LIFELETICS podcast. I invite you to leave any feedback in the review section so we can continue to better our content. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more. It helps us more than you know. See you next week.